As we now pretty much officially wrap up the 2025 transfer portal, we can go ahead and take a look at where the top 10 guys are all going. We have a couple of big names at the quarterback position, some really good receivers, and also some defensive linemen who are going to make a huge impact at the next school. I'm going to end up using 24/7 Sports for my top 10, and we're going to go through each player, talk about why they're such a big deal, where they're going, and how I think they will fit. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about where the top 10 players in the 2025 transfer portal are going. Alright, so at number 10 we have Koutas. He's an interior offensive lineman who's going from Arkansas to Ole Miss. Going back in time, Koutas was always a big deal, as coming out of Christian Brothers High School in Memphis, Tennessee, he was listed as a 4-star recruit, the number 10 interior offensive lineman, and the 202nd overall player in the class of 2022. Again, he had offers from pretty much every school in the country, but chose to end up going to Arkansas. Koutas pretty much made an immediate impact while he was in Fayetteville, as he played in 13 games as a freshman in 2022, started 9 games in 2023 as a sophomore, and then this past year also played well when he was on the field. Pro Football Focus was really high on him, and then combining that with his 6'5", 313-pound frame, Koutas was seen as one of the top linemen in the portal, and will now be heading over to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is expected to have a really good team next year, and Lane Kiffin always does well in the portal, so this is a huge addition for them, and he will help anchor their new offense and their new look for 2025. At number 9, we have a guy by the name of Princewell Umanalin. Apparently that's how you say it, but he's currently listed as the number 9 overall player in the portal, and he is a defensive lineman from Nebraska. Going back in time, he was seen as a 4-star recruit and the number 24 edge rusher in the class of 2023, and this was for good reason. Coming out of Manor High School in Texas, he ended up having 130 tackles, 47 TFLs, and 21 sacks in just 23 games in his last 2 years there. He ended up going to Nebraska for his first 2 years of college football, as in 2023 he had 22 tackles with 1 sack as a freshman, and then this past year in 2024, finished with a total of 13 tackles and 1 pass deflection. It also looks like he has a brother who apparently has like the same name or something, and that was super confusing during the research process, but they will both end up at Ole Miss. This is now the second straight guy that'll end up with the Rebels, and Lane Kiffin will complement his offensive line with a big-time defensive lineman. Alright, so at number 8 we have our first quarterback on the list, and that is Luke Kromenhoek. Coming out of Savannah, Georgia, Kromenhoek was one of the top players in the class of 2024, as he was listed as a 4-star recruit and the number 4 quarterback and the 35th player nationally. He ended up going to the Benedictine Military School, which was located in Georgia, and while he was there, he had over 7,000 yards and 73 touchdowns as a 3-year starter. He had offers from schools all over the country, but would end up going to Florida State, expecting a redshirt behind DJ and Brock Glenn. Towards the end of the year though, Kromenhoek would be forced into action because of how horrible they all were, and then he ended up passing for a total of 500 yards with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. Those stats didn't exactly pop off the page, but because of his near 5-star status and his huge potential, he decided to enter the portal and is listed as the number 8 overall player. He quickly committed to Mississippi State, where he will likely take over for Michael Van Buren as the starter. I mean, at least I hope he will. At number 7, we have our first wide receiver of the bunch, and that is Duce Robinson. He's going to go from USC to Florida State, but going back in time, he was listed as the number 1 tight end in the class of 2023 and the 19th player nationally. Robinson went to Pinnacle High School in Arizona. He has a lot of potential. He ended up having 84 catches for 1,614 yards and 14 touchdowns as a senior, and his time at USC was also solid. As a freshman, he caught 16 passes for 351 yards and 2 touchdowns, and this past year, Duce caught 23 passes for 396 yards and 5 touchdowns. He has pretty much limitless potential, and he will now head over to Florida State. Again, I'm not quite sure what I think of this new Florida State offense, and if this is really that good of a fit, but we'll have to wait and see, and the Seminoles got a gem. At number 6, we have another USC Trojan, and that comes in form of wide receiver Zachariah Branch. At 5'10", 175 pounds, Branch has been seen as one of the top receivers in college football and coming out of the high school ranks for a couple of years now. He'll be going from USC to Georgia, and the Bulldogs will hopefully be able to get more production out of him. Coming out of Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas, he was the number 1 receiver and the 7th overall player in the class of 2023, and he made a pretty instant impact while he was at USC. But people have been talking about him for quite some time, as while he was in high school, he had 45 catches for 753 yards and 11 touchdowns as a senior, but was seen as one of the most athletic players in the country, and had that it factor that every coach wants. Branch would end up doing solid as a freshman in 2023, catching 31 passes for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns, and this past year, he did increase his production to 47 catches for 500 yards, but only had 1 touchdown. Teams are definitely going to want to utilize his speed and unique abilities, but he's not yet translated that into touchdowns, and hopefully he'll be able to do that at Georgia, and with all the drop problems they had in 2024, hopefully he can become their top receiver in 2025. Okay, so at number 5, we have Damon Wilson II, and this is super interesting because as of recording this video, just 2 hours ago, Wilson chose Mizzou. Mizzou is the team I like the most, so this is a huge get for the Tigers, as at one point, Wilson was actually a top 50 recruit and the number 5 edge rusher in the class of 2023. He was supposed to have a terrific career at Georgia, and so far in his 2 seasons there, he's been solid. 24/7 Sports actually thought he'd be a future first-round pick, as they listed him as a 5-star recruit after having 82 tackles, with 8 sacks, 8 TFLs, and 7 QB hurries. In his freshman year at Georgia, he had a total of 2 tackles, and this past year he had 22 tackles, with 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. He wasn't on the field as much as he would have liked, and probably would have seen an increase in snaps in 2025, but he decided to enter the portal and will join his former teammate Darius Smith now at Mizzou. Mizzou is loading up on the defensive line, and this is a huge get for the Tigers, and Damon should be a one-and-done type player there. At number 4, we have Singleton Jr., and the Auburn Tigers will get one of the best receivers in the country, coming out of Alexander High School in Georgia. Singleton was always a big-time player, as he finished his high school career with over 100 catches for 1,600 yards and 16 touchdowns. But despite these big numbers, he was only listed as a 3-star recruit, and was barely outside the top 1,000 in the class of 2023. He'd arrived at Georgia Tech with a lot of potential, and in his 2 years so far, he has delivered for the most part. In 2023, he caught 48 passes for 714 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then this past season in 2024, he had 56 catches for 754 yards and 3 scores. In his career, he has over 100 catches for 1,500 yards and 9 touchdowns, and will now be paired up with Cam Coleman, and hopefully Auburn's receiving core will be much better in 2025, and the offense will be much more explosive. Our number 3 transfer in the portal is Patrick Payton, an edge rusher from Florida State, who will now be going over to LSU. Going back in time, Payton was a top 200 recruit in the class of 2021, and has seemingly been in college football for quite some time now. He was listed as the number 38 overall linebacker and the 329th overall player coming out of Miami Northwestern High School in 2021. Payton ended up having a solid couple of years at Florida State, as he saw the field in 2022, having a total of 5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 31 tackles. In 2023, despite a loaded defensive line, he also had 43 tackles and 7 sacks, and then in 2024, his numbers took a bit of a dip to 35 tackles and 4 sacks, but he still ended up having a good year, despite how dysfunctional that team was. He now brings over 100 tackles, 16 total sacks, and 3 forced fumbles with him, as he'll go over to LSU and will try to help make that defense better, and hopefully compete for an SEC title and a future first-round draft spot. At number 2, we have a quarterback in John Mathew. Coming out of Little Elm High School in Texas, he was seen as somewhat of a legend, and he put up crazy numbers while he was there, but scouts didn't really pay much attention to him. He ended up throwing for 2,300 yards as a junior, and was a 4-year starter and helped put the school on the map, but as I said, Washington State's offensive coordinator made a late discovery with him, and he eventually decided to go to Wazoo after being the number 124 quarterback in his recruiting class. Mathew was seen as a hidden gem, and after sitting behind Cam Ward, he would take over in 2024, having a terrific season. He threw for 3,139 yards, with 29 touchdowns and 7 picks, while also rushing for 826 yards and 15 touchdowns on the ground. Mathew helped Washington State have a breakout season, and after following his offensive coordinator into the portal, he would commit to Oklahoma, and should be the starter next year. Some are giving him Heisman hype and 2026 NFL draft hype, but for now, I'm excited to see what Mathew can do next season, and he has an awesome story. And finally, at number 1, we have another quarterback in Carson Beck. After originally being a baseball recruit, Carson Beck would flip between Alabama and Georgia, and would sit behind a logjam of quarterbacks until 2023, when he beat out Brock Vandegrift for the starting job. Beck ended up having a terrific 2023 season, throwing for 3,941 yards with 24 touchdowns. Instead of going off to the NFL, he'd come back for one more season, where he was a preseason number 1 overall pick favorite. He ended up throwing for 3,500 yards with 28 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, and while in some ways he had better stats than last year, he also struggled with turnovers and had a couple of really bad performances. Beck was expected to go off to the NFL, but instead, he entered the portal, a couple hours later picked Miami, and it's rumored he has about a $3 million NIL deal. His girlfriend also goes to Miami, so that was probably somewhat of a factor, and all of a sudden he's the #1 quarterback in the portal, who hopefully tried to come in and do what Cam Moore did. Again, Miami's defense still needs a lot of help, but maybe he'll pan out and be worth that big paycheck. For now though, I remain skeptical. So yeah, today we talked about where the top 10 transfers all ended up, and I gave you a brief explanation of who they are and where they are going. What do you guys think? What transfer on this list is overrated? Who do you think is the most underrated transfer in this year's portal? And what portal type topic should I do next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.